Hey, hello and welcome to another video. Hopefully this pans out okay. I've had to kind of jury rig this together because I have no idea how to get production values. Production values are for other content creators. I am just going to botch it. So what I thought I'd do for this one is just something I thought would hopefully be interesting. I've loaded up all the blue Earth cards, as you can see on the left here, and I've loaded up a tier list, and I'm going to rank them. So, if you know what you're doing about the game, a lot of this is going to be very boring and very rudimentary because you probably just know what the good cards are. But nonetheless, I think there's some discussion points to be had around some of them. Not all of them, because a lot of Earth cards are plain bad. But, I thought this would be interesting content, and I thought it might be something that maybe newer or more hesitant players would get some sort of something from, because, it might show them, how we analyse quality of cards. So the starting point here is, why have I done Earth Blues? And the answer is because basic lands exist in Fab. Flesh and Blood requires keywords of cards for certain things, be it fusers, being it keeping channel effects around, be it for decompose. And you need to put an amount in, even if you don't really want the cards. And, if Verdant players could staple the word Earth onto random other cards, I don't think we'd play any of our Earth Blues, with one exception. Maybe two, but I honestly think one. Because we would just take 3 blocks. Just any 3 block blues. Yeah, if we were allowed to run like 12 copies of Autumn's Touch, we would, right? That's kind of the deal we're at. So, to start this off, I'm going to sort of frame a few things. So, S tier, normally in tier listing, is meant to be reserved for the absolute best, never leave home without it stuff. It is meant to be what they call above the point of balance. If you're talking about it in the context of fighting games or MOBAs, S tier characters are kind of cracked, right? They're a bit broken. S plus tier is often mentioned in those games, and S plus is like, devs, please nerf this immediately. But S tier stuff should cop a small nerf. With regards to Flesh and Blood, it's not really appropriate in terms of our card pool, and certainly not in terms of our blue. So what we're doing is bending the rules on that ever so slightly. And what we've got is that I'm going to frame it by taking Heartbeat of Candlehold, and we are dumping that once I can find it, because my screen is tiny due to how I set this up. There we go. I'm dropping that in S tier. After that, I'm going to start going alphabetically just about. I will put one of the worst cards in just to frame something else, but we'll do the Heartbeat discussion first. It is blue. It is Earth. It is a 3 block. It is a non-attack action, which means that it works with our embodiments. And also bring up on screen. To be a 4 block on various turns. If this had a blank text box, I think it's still our best Earth card in blue. It's pushing it for just best Earth card anyway. It ticks every box for resource. When you staple on the fact that it can gain 3 life and that it's increments of 1, so it works with your hero ability, meaning that, at its top peak, it can be gain 3, deal 3. It is just a good card, and as I say, it is one of the best cards in Verdance's deck in total. I am adamant it is our best blue, period, because it does it all. Um, so that's the heartbeat discussion. It's fairly swift because this is just great. And then on the opposite side of this, I am going to choose Sigil of Sanctuary. That can go in the D tier to signify just trash. Things that I do not think you should put in the deck ever. So, this thing's been made for draft. That is very, very clear, and it's kind of annoying that they made it just a terrible draft card, and that they put it in a rare slot. That's ever so slightly offensive as well. But it just doesn't do anything, right? So it ticks the box of being Earth Blue, but bear in mind all these cards do. And then it sits in play. And, you know, if your opponent is Kado, they'll blow it up, it'll prevent one, and the embodiment of Earth will do nothing. That's terrible. If your opponent is a physical only character, they'll never blow it up and you'll never get an embodiment. There is the slightest argument of a niche case into someone like Aurora, who on her combo turn might blow it up and then let you block a bit, but it's just so restrictive. You do not want to be wasting deck space nor sideboard space on this card. That's why I'm using it as the framing for what D tier looks like. And then from there, we get to go through in order, which is very helpful for me because I can then actually find these cards. Amulet of Earth. It's not an overall useless card, but it's quite bad. You know, giving attack action card you control +1 for the turn has potential in some hero. You know, when we get an Earth Ninja at some point and they can kick that off, that has potential to do tons of damage. We don't play one attack a turn on average. We play less than one attack a turn on average. And more importantly, we do not have any Earth Fuse. So this is a blank text box, 0 block card. And that's, again, all the discussion it really needs. It drops into the D tier as literally anything else from our selections. We next have Autumn's Touch. This is the poster child for Earth Blues. And that kind of makes me sad. It's really good. Blank text box, blocks 3, blue is Earth. It is absolutely our definition of basic land. It is not as good as Heartbeat, but it is absolutely the best thing we have after that. And, you know, how disappointing for Earth that is the case of what we look for more than anything else is a 5 damage blank text box card, because we never intend to use it. We just intend to show it to people to get our, you know, to use a Magic the Gathering term, to get our green mana, right? That is what we are playing at. Nonetheless, it is fantastic. And, you know, hopefully I don't have to shuffle this around because I'm choosing badly on the tiers, but we're putting this at A tier. It is the top of A tier. It is our best card after we have got past Heartbeat. We're then on to things like Blossoming. So, quick shout out. Really like the art on this. I'm going to mention a few of these. I actually will say, these are all pretty interesting, abstract kind of bundles of twig arts. Like them. Do like a little bit of, you know, flowers growing out of skull. The whole life from death decompose theme in art. I like this. It's not my favourite one. We'll get to my favourite one in a couple, but this is high up there. In terms of the card itself, It's only a 2 block, which is the thing that is going to drag all of the attack actions down because they don't get any benefit from embodiments and they only block 2. Really hurts them, and again, it sort of puts the Autumn's Touch into contrast. This card doesn't do enough. So it's got Decompose. And if we really wanted more Decompose, it would maybe have a place in our lives. But spending 2 to make a 3 attack doesn't cut it. Gaining 1 life doesn't really do much. Even when your ability's on, it becomes a 2 for 5. Or you could be using Autumn's Touch. That's a 3 for 5, and there's very little functional difference between costing 2 and costing 3 because you're generally pitching a blue for them. There's a little bit of difference. We do run some yellows, but it's not a big difference. So this is really, I think, fitting firmly into C. You would take it over the D tier, but I don't think you want it. Break Ground. So these are from I forget which set that even is. It's basically the first Earth set when the elemental keywords all kicked in. Someone can throw it in the comments. I'm sure I am absolutely blanking on the set name that introduced those guys. Was it Tales of Aria, or is that too early? Either way, what you'll find from this era is this is where they cemented the fact that Earth's block for 2. I never understood it, and I don't know why they stick with it. But you will find that a lot of them are just very, very underwhelming. So, Break Ground falls under the exact same thing of it doesn't do much. It doesn't block well, and you don't really want to play it as an attack. It's only 5 damage, and cycling your arsenal to draw a card is not something we crave. Apparently, it's not in my uploaded stuff for this tier thing. So if you could just imagine that I have slung it into C tier, because it's genuinely not here, I think. Is it? Oh no, tell a lie. There it is. Again, the thing I'm using for this, the images are tiny, as you can kind of. Hopefully, they're bigger on the screen you've got, because I tried to resize it a bit, but I had real problems getting this into scale. This brings us to Burgeoning. We're going to go a bit faster on this one. Same problem. If played from Arsenal, does 5 damage. So worse than Autumn's Touch in every way possible. Into C tier, because again, slightly better than D tier. It at least blocks. And then Cadaverous Tilling. Thing 1, this is one of the nicest pieces of art I think we have. I think it's spectacular. Mark Poole does nice art. I've got a friend bringing me a playmat from London with this on, so I'm pretty happy today. But yeah, lovely, lovely art. So, only a 2 block is an attack. The classic problem we're going to see on all these cards really hurts it. I genuinely think all the Decompose cards should have been considered to be 3 blocks. I don't know if that would have pushed Verdance too far, but you see it with a lot of the attack actions where you just go, they're just so poor. And because they don't interact with embodiments, it's even worse. And, the game itself overrates Earth cards with embodiments because it's designed around Briar. But we're not Briar, and we're never seeing Briar again. I assume we're not going to get a hero who just goes, if I play cards, I get embodiments. So we are stuck in the 2 category, and I think that's a big problem. But it's especially a problem for attack actions that cannot get that bonus. Tilling, however, to its merit, not the worst. It's blue, and it attacks for 6. Attacking for 6 is the point where I do go, this is a little bit better than you'd think. So I'm not suggesting you go for it, but I do think it gets to go into, this B tier. And again, bear in mind, I'm not using the tiers properly. I'm just kind of using them to try and break these into groups. S and A are going to be all the stuff that I think you actually should consider. Anything that's hit to B really isn't good enough to get in there, I think. But it's okay for what it is, to be honest. Canopy Shelter is where it starts to get weird. This card can only block. That's not really a problem for us because it can be pitched for blue. Being pitched for blue is absolutely fine. It makes a might token and it blocks for 2. Blocking for 2 again is not our ideal. It's it's our baseline for cards where we roll our eyes and wish it was a 3. But it does give you a might token, so you do get 3 points of value out of it. The difficulty here is, how do you realise that 1 point? So, to give you a really good example, if you've got a Command and Conquer in your hand, Canopy Shelter starts feeling worth it. Because you block with the Shelter and then you swing for 7 with a Command and Conquer. They can't de-react it, so they're not getting any cheeky 4 blocks in for the most part. And they've now got 7 to deal with or lose their arsenal, which is often a 3-card tax on a person. It's 2 cards and a piece of equipment still. They can't just efficiently stop it. So, on that basis, I do like Canopy Shelter. I think it can have good places to be. And, you see Florian playing with it a lot because he can get 2 might tokens, and that's where it tips into, no, this is actually pretty spicy. But we do suffer from the fact that we often want to do arcane damage, and Canopy Shelter can kind of not align, which I again think shoves it into B tier. But I do think it gets to go at the front of B tier. Can I rearrange these? Yeah. I think this is the best thing in that tier at the moment. Earth Form is a great example, again, of a card that just needed to block 3. And I know there's the problem that would just outright power creep Autumn's Touch, but all the Earth Form colours, I don't know, you could make it rainbow if it's 3 block. I can concede that idea, but I do think that if they'd just given us red Earth Form with 3 block as a card, I think that would have been a good thing for us in general, because it gives you an access to embodiment. And again, one thing I'd say is, this card is maybe a little underrated in places because creating an embodiment can be quite powerful. I think the red one is definitely better than the blue one. But, being able to swing for 7 or 5 and, into an opponent who isn't going to really block it, you get some damage, that's good. You get the embodiment and it starts pulling you value back. And a lot of this time you're just looking at the proposition of value, right? And you're looking to try and get a minimum of 6 value because you're paying 2 cards. And, even the blue one is just about on rate. And swing for 5, and 5 is an annoying number because you need to put a piece of armour and a card from your hand in if you're not going to use 2 cards to stop it. If you're using 2 cards to stop it, it's kind of done its job for us. If it gets to hit for 5 and then you get an embodiment and then you get to block with 2 4s in the next turn, it's actually pulling its weight a lot. And again, it's going to get slotted into that B tier because it's not good enough. But it is solid. And it really feels bad to me that it's yet another of the many, many cards we got in a set that I'm pretty sure was designed to be drafted. and therefore kind of held these cards back just a smidge. Because this is so very nearly almost good. So I'm going to slot it in there, just below the canopy. But, like, good solid B tier card. We're then on to the card that lives in my brain rent free. I love this card. It's another one I want to shout the artwork on. I quite like this kind of almost sort of Rebecca Gray kind of, slightly abstract, simplified art. It's nice and it's a change of pace from some of the other stuff. As for the card itself, it's only a 2-block, but it does have the fact that it's not an attack going for it, which means that it can be a 3-block on various turns, and that is of benefit to it. The follow-up is that it creates embodiments. Creating embodiments is good and is something that I think as Verdance players we would like to do more. The downside you tend to have is most of our ways of creating an embodiment require using up cards. So ignoring the armour, which obviously is our best way of getting embodiments, using a card to get an embodiment is very hard to break even on. So Earthform, I think, is our best value embodiment because you can swing for 7 and hopefully get an embodiment. And then that 7's actually like 9 value, right? 2 cards, 9 value. Quite efficient. Your problem with playing Earth's Embrace is you're using up a card. So when you use that card, you really need to get like 4 value from it. And that becomes really, really difficult. Add to that this costs 1. So you're having to use 2 cards, which means you need to get like 6 value out of this to be doing well. And a lot of our cards cost 3. So Earth's Embrace makes me very, very sad because it's one of those cards where you look and you go, it's so nearly amazing. And I keep thinking at some point we might just get a card supplemented in somewhere, or, next time they decide to print some Earth stuff, and you go, if they give us a 2 cost that banishes cards, that kind of slots into the deck better than the ones we have, because we have 2 costs, but they're not very good. We only run Plough. And honestly, we probably wouldn't play Plough if we didn't have Felling, right? If Felling was banned tomorrow, I think Plough would come out of the deck, as we kind of abandoned the Earth content of our Earth decks nearly entirely, which is a very strange place to be. Yeah, it has that problem of it just doesn't math out well. And you look at it and you go, oh, but if I could keep it for 2 turns, it'd be amazing. And, I keep staring at it every now and again and going, oh, I'd love to get that rolling. Because, it has potential. It just doesn't have much potential, right? That's kind of the problem. But it is one of those ones where I just sort of go, I wonder if one day we'll see a new set spoiler and go, Earth's Embrace is playable. When we get a new non-attack Earth spell that, does some damage and removes an Earth card, and you go, oh, we can combo that with Earth's Embrace and we're going to get, 2 embodiments a turn or something. And, the sky's the limit. It's that weird thing of if you could keep up 5 decomposers in a row or something, this is the most broken card we've got. But you absolutely are never going to manage that ceiling. And it's a shame. And I've just spent all that time hyping up what could have been, and what is, I think, is that it basically lands about here in B tier, which is a shame because I would love it to be more playable, and it just isn't. But I really, really wanted to slot that discussion in the middle of here because, otherwise it's just me ranking a load of cards in a very boring manner. when I think some of them actually have a lot to discuss on them, and I think Earth's Embrace is absolutely a card that could have been. Earth Urge. This, again, has some potential. It buffs attack actions, which means you can use it to get Great Big Bomb Turn. I don't think we really utilise it well, but if you were really scrabbling for extra blues, maybe. You know, it's the usual thing. You can pair it with a Command and Conquer, and your Command and Conquer's doing 9, and a 9-point Command and Conquer can be very, very annoying. But it costs 2, so you're using 2 cards to get that +3, and you know, it maths out very, very poorly. It's always the problem with things like this card, where you go, I love the idea, but I've got to basically keep a 4-card hand, and I'm using 2 cards to get, 1.5 value per card. So, that's basically where Surge falls off the radar. I think it basically ends up at the top of the C tier for that reason. Almost wanted to put it at the bottom of the B tier because it's not an attack, but it's just not good enough. Evergreen, another shout out. Do like a bit of glowing reindeer. Or regular deer, I don't know. I'm going to call him a reindeer. He's a fancy deer, whoever he is. Looks beautiful in foil, by the way, because all the lines on him glow. This is a fairly strong contender to some degree. A few people have brainstormed even playing this blue evergreen quite recently. There's a lot of talk about us running red evergreens as part of a anti-fatigue plan. The red ones have the advantage of finishing the game, 2 points per cycle faster. And they have the advantage of being able to be just used as a generic popper into Illusionists. So there's a lot going for them in that respect. The blue one is slower, but it does have the advantage of giving us, a weapon, as it were. And there is this sort of interesting thing where you can cycle 2 blues like forever with them kind of paying for each other, and that's quite helpful. Whereas with reds, it's not the biggest problem really, but you need a red and a blue together and they can choke your hands up a little bit because, until you get past the fatigue part of the game, you don't really want to see them play them very often. So, they have been discussed. They might even make it into a list at some point. And it's a cool card. It does stuff. I think that's the big thing, right? A lot of this Earth stuff doesn't actually in practice do anything. Evergreen does. It creates as a weapon in Wizard for when we're going, we literally run out of the ability to hit people eventually. We get to a point where we cannot physically deal damage anymore. And, thing to remember is that opponents of Wizards have Arcane Barrier, and that never wears out. So that physical damage source that you can do over and over and over again is potentially very big. But as I said, I think the 7s are definitely the correct call over the 5s at the moment. But opinions change, metas change. I could see this, shifting up at some point. But I do think it's in there, and I do think it kind of makes the B tier at about, don't know which side of Earth form we put it. Here maybe? I'll go here. I think they're about the same and could be even. The next one's Fertile Ground. Being one, I hate this art. I've called out the good ones. I do not like this one. This makes me think of that thing in the Hunger Games where that kid Cake decorates himself and hides as a rock. And once you see that, I hope you never unsee it because you deserve it. Weird face on the floor that gains your life. So the simple problem with this is it's way below rate, right? It costs 2 to get the life, it can't block. And when there's four or more banished cards, you only get 3 life. The red one has been one I've considered for things because gaining 5 is quite a good chunk. And I've also toyed around with the idea of can you make a Verdance deck that just gains so much life you can kind of be a pain with it. Current answer is no, decks are too fast. But I do kind of like the concept of red fertile, but the blue, you know, you can gain 3 life without paying any resources. Old sigil. I don't think there's much more you have to say on that, unfortunately. It slots itself in somewhere in C tier. I'm not going to organise C tier from best to worst. I've left the better ones at the top, but it's just going firmly somewhere in the middle of the kind of crap cards. Flourish. It's not bad. I think comparing it to Earthlaw is really good. So what you obviously see is it doesn't inherently give things the +2. They have to gain some themselves. But it does work with Felling and Plough, which are 2 of your best spells. So if you did want to go this route and run something like this, it does get you +2 from one card, rather than the 1.5 from the other. Still not worth it. This will be the line I say over and over as I go through this and talk about all the blows, but still not worth it. We don't pump our physical spells enough times for it to matter. It's got the advantage of being, again, a non-attack action, which is a positive a lot of the time, but it just doesn't do enough. And it's going to go into, I'd say, the middle of C tier somewhere, up here. We just don't have space for it. We now get on to a very simple, non-contentious one, Fruits of the Forest. This does everything we want it to do. The block isn't great because it's an earth attack, so it's only 2. It does 5 damage when you play it as an attack. You don't want to do it, but you do sometimes do it. Sometimes you swing for a Prism Angel with 1. Sometimes you just have an absolute trash hand and decide that 5 damage is what you want to do with your life. Being 5 rather than 4 or 3, like some of the other blues, puts it in a good place. But, you play it because it's an earth blue that also basically is 2/3 of a sigil. It's gain 2. Gain 2 is big. And it's an earth blue. It is a big design problem, in my opinion, of Earth, that when we look at what we want in the deck, we are always picking on this kind of basic land concept. Earth blue that I don't ever have to play for the actual card. You do sometimes block with it to get a break point, but you don't plan to block with Fruits of the Forest, you plan to throw it away. It gets extra power from the fact that if you draw it on turn 1, it's just 3 life. I've started games on 47 life because I've drawn double Fruit Sigil, and you just go gain 7 Arsenal card, and that's amazing. Yeah, I don't think it's quite as good as Autumn's, not quite, but it makes up the rest of our A tier pretty much. In terms of being an absolute sure, absolute going to be in there. And if you look through Verdance, these are not surprising statements. The Heartbeat, the Autumn's Touch, the Fruits of the Forest, they are absolutely the 3 that make every single deck. We then move on to Harvest Season. This is going to be another very quick pass. It gains 1 life next turn. It costs 1. It is not good enough in blue. It is the story of so many blue cards that they they scaled down far too much because of the low number. So good blues are often good because the red is obviously like 2 damage higher, and the blues lower damage isn't the biggest problem. You know, you'd like the +2 damage, but you still get the full effect and you still get the bulk of the damage. Like blue earth form as an example. Like blue earth form is not that much worse than red earth form because you get 5 damage instead of the 7. That's like a 30% drop of value, but you get to be blue, which is obviously a 200% increase in value. And this is the same. This is the problem with harvest season, where you do get that increase of pitch value, but you do lose 2/3 of the life gain. And a card for 1 life is terrible value. Most of the point, 2 cards, right? Because you're having to pay for the thing. So it's in comparison to red harvest season, which again is possibly not quite good enough in itself. Yeah, blue is unfortunately just a dumpster fire, because it scales so badly. And it's not D tier, but it's absolutely down in the bottoms of C. We've done Heartbeat. Now we have Rootbound. Blue Rootbound is really interesting because it starts so many fights. It is not, at first glance, very good. And that is what most people will tell you. And at the end of this, I am probably going to tell you the same. But I am going to try and talk people around it just a little bit. If we assume that you're not decomposing it at all, it's a 1 block. And a 1 block is really, really bad, and we all agree that blocking 1 with a card is a terrible use of a card. However, what if you need that for a break point? You can play it to get +1, and you can play it and decompose it to get +2, and to get decompose if you happen to need decompose because you are, not online with having enough banished that you've got good fellings, or if you're just trying to claw your way to 8. Yeah, decompose is a good effect that we often play tax cards for. Breakpoint thing's the big one in my opinion. If you are struggling to find and slot another blue card, I don't think this is the worst choice at all. I think this is actually not a bad choice. And just think through how many times you've had someone swing for you with something. They're coming in with a snatch, and you're going, "Oh, I've got to block a snatch now." Well, at least with the blue root bound, you've had the opportunity to use it as a blue earth card otherwise, and it's still pulling the same job as like all the 2 blocks kind of do in terms of covering that breakpoint if you're having to just throw another card in against your better judgment. And then it gets even better when you look at the fact that obviously it's a D react. So there's very much that thing where, someone might swing for 3 or for 2, and you see it a bit with Fang. I think he's probably a good one to sort of describe it from. He swings with a knife, and the knife's going to do 2 because he always pumps the knife a little bit because he needs to for the the go again effects on it. So you put a 2 block in front of it, and then he goes, "Oh, it's actually 4, and it's going to mark you." Well, at that point, you don't mind a blue root bound, right? You go, "Ooh, I can add another 2. I'm at 4. I'm going to block this stupid dagger, and he's not going to get his mark, and I'm going to disrupt his turn, and he's going to not get his fealty tokens." And that's why I think people underrate it. Now, again, I don't think you should go hurtling out of your way to play it. But I do think it's a lot better than people give it credit for. And if someone sort of turned around and went, "Oh yeah, I'm running like one or two just to get more Earth blues in," I wouldn't judge them because I do think it's a choice. You know, as in, I don't think it is inherently the wrong choice to do. As for where it lands, I think it absolutely firmly goes to the top of Bay, and it kind of creates the point where I almost want to juggle everything down the tier list to make some space for the kind of like, better than B, less than A kind of thing. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to break this stupid website if I do that, but, I want that sort of mentioned in there. We're then on to Seeds. Seeds is another of our really good cards. Preventing 5, and 5 that can be broken up any way you see fit, is very, very strong. The fact that it can get put in the bin and just loiter and get grabbed back later with your hat in certain matches where you don't want to get wombo comboed, like into Kano, the ability to fish up a seeds and go, no burning me alive. Really, really powerful. You can't run a full playset, but that doesn't necessarily concern us. I don't know if 1 or 2 is the right amount. 3 is definitely too much because you just start drawing them when you can't use them. But it does bring us a lot of value. It also does useful things like it converts no block cards into block. If you draw a sigil that you don't want to play because you are saving it for like a second cycle combo thing, you can get it in the arsenal and wait for a seeds, and it kind of earns you your value back really nicely like that. It is not as good as autumns and fruits, but I do think certainly like as a one-off, it takes up the very bottom of our A tier. We've then got Sigil of Earth. This card, almost good. Told you I'd say that a lot. It's a sigil, so it has some sort of potential interaction with the wizard gloves that everyone forgets we have because they're really not very good for us. So, if you are really, really reaching for weird things to do, you've got a little bit of synergy between the sigil cards and this, and it can sort of do something. It's a card that turns itself into an embodiment. An embodiment is fine. If you've got time to get this into play, if you draw this turn 1, it's a really good turn 1 play. If you don't draw it turn 1, really all it does is pitch, and I find that to be difficult because you don't want to leak the damage to play it to try and claw back what it was just lost. You're taking 2 damage if you don't block with it, and then you've got to block with 2 non-attacks next turn. And I don't know if you know how statistics work, but 100% of the time you will draw no non-attacks the next turn. When that pops, because it doesn't go until like your next cycle, you don't get it like the turn you play it, you get it the turn after. When it pops, you will draw like a D react and 3 attacks every time, 100%. It's a genuine problem though. If you think about that, it's obviously not 100% of the time, but let's say it's 30% of the time, just as a number for discussion. 30% of the time you get no value from playing that sigil and you should have blocked with that. That is bad statistics. And it hurts it so much. And I think it drops it into being the new top of C tier. We did Sigil of Sanctuary, terrible card. We then get onto another cool discussion piece. So tomorrow. I have been trying to find room for like 2 of these for God knows how long because I think it's got some merit. and I can never ever find space in the deck for it. So we're going to talk it up first of all, really big. It's blue, it's Earth, great. It redraws you one of the cards when you play it from your arsenal, so its card value is really good in regards to, it's refunding you stuff. Anything that draws its cards back is something you should consider in a deck, period. Its ability to put an Earth card on the bottom of your deck basically reads put Felling back in deck. And when you're playing a longer, grindier game, 2 more Fellings is probably the difference between winning and losing into a lot of matchups. The amount of new games I've played where I've gone like, if I had 2 more Fellings, I think I could have closed this. So there are all the upsides. One last secret one. Notice that it banishes itself. So if you can open up with a Sir Tomorrow before your first decompose, you can actually decompose for free to get to your 4 mark. So if you do a Sir Tomorrow and then do a Felling decomposing 3 Earth, you only had to do 1 decompose and you're already swinging for 8. And that sounds really good. And then here's where the card starts dipping, unfortunately. It has to have a target. You can't just play it to cycle it. So you have to have got a 2-cost Earth card into your bin to play it. And if you haven't, it's sat until you're in your arsenal till you do. Because it banishes, it also causes the problem that it doesn't help you decompose. It just means you have to decompose less. But obviously, a lot of the time, you just need to decompose because your main use of decompose is to turn on additional effects. And its third detriment is it costs 1. And there are so many turns where you don't have 1 spare. Our deck is built around using 3 a lot, and when it has turns with 2s in, it's often looking at playing yellows, pitching yellows to play those cards. There's a lot of hands where you go, I do not have that 3rd or that 4th spare to play the Sir. And that's what really kicks it out of being a top tier card for us, I think. And we're going to get to contentious places. I'm going to put it slightly below the blue root bound because of it. Because I actually do think you get slightly more use from the blue root bound. I'm not saying you should run one over the other. I'm not even saying you should run anything that's hit the B tier, if I'm honest. B tier is low enough that we have problems with it. But, top of B tier is where you should start considering things if you're desperate for another blow. And I'm not sure which of those 2 I think is better. Strength for 4 seasons. This again, as I'm going to say with every attack, if it blocked 3, I think we'd consider it. I mean, go the opposite way. If it blocked 3, of course we'd consider it. It would be better than all the other Earth cards. But, just in a vacuum, assuming we could make other things called, if everything had 3 block, this would start looking fairly juicy in itself, I think. Because it does 6 in the late game. 6 in the late game off a blue is not bad and gives us a way to keep extending our damage. Its obvious problem is it's a 2 block. Always bad. It's an attack action, which, again, even worse. And the fact is, because of how we play our deck, because what we're doing with it, we're never going to swing for 6 with this. You've got better shit to be doing. I think we would consider it strongly in the circumstances I described, just because it would have potential. It would be like a well, if I need it kind of thing. But its stats are so bad that you are not going to run it under those circumstances. And I think that basically just drops it somewhere into C tier. I don't know where. You just go in the middle. Strong Yield. It's another pump card. It costs 1. It only gives +1. It is bad. I can do that one fast because I've discussed that on 2 other cards and there's nothing better to say about it. Summer's Fall is where we get back to our good cards. So this is a great example of cards that actually pull some weight. So again, it's a 2 block and that sucks. But it's blue and it's earth, so you might want it. It decomposes, so it helps with deck consistency. You'll notice the decomposes up to 1 target aura. So you can do it and target none. So it is a way to force a decompose if you're just trying to get something decomposed. Little note that a lot of people don't seem to know, you can fizzle the decompose on this, despite how you would think it works from the wording, by the fact that you know, and by the fact that nearly every other decompose, I think possibly every decompose, is banish the cards and then there's no window to do anything. Because this targets, it actually forces the targeting on early, leaves a reaction window, and lets them fizzle the decompose. So if you try to Summer's Fall a fealty, they can eat the fealty and fizzle your decompose if they don't want you to remove cards. And it's really weird timing because of obviously all the sort of you may stuff. Like, it shouldn't work like that, but that is the way it's been ruled. I don't like it. I think they should clarify on that. But yeah, that is apparently how that goes down. So just be aware it exists. But what I'd say is, it still does blow up fealties, which is quite handy. You know, sometimes you just want a fealty off the table. Sometimes you just want to swing at a Vincent and go, I would like your stupid aura off the table. And because it's blue, it tucks in really, really nicely. You know, there's prism auras, I mean, not for much longer, but there's enigma stuff that can be removed. It can be really nice into the mirror match if you just really need to tuck a channel under the deck, something along those lines. It does a lot. And by having all that versatility stapled onto an earth blow, it gives you good options. And, that basically, I think, gives it the last spot we're going to give to anything in A tier. And, at this point, I assume you realise that this tier list looks very, very obvious. If you go look at anyone's deck list, you are going to see the first 3 cards I put in this list, and then sometimes you'll see the other 2. And then everything B tier onwards, you're not really going to see. And it's for a good reason. We've all done the work on this, and we all kind of know where it's going. But as I say, I think it's useful to think this through sometimes, to understand why something didn't make it. Because, once you learn this stuff, you make better evaluation when you're building a deck yourself. And you sometimes make better evaluation in a game where you're trying to work out, well, what do I keep, what do I lose, turn to turn with my hand. Because you can go, well, I understand what makes this card better than this card. So we've got 3 left to get through. Summerwood Shelter. I almost like it. It's got a similar argument to the Root Bound, I think, that you can use it as a weird D-react. And it's got the advantage that it's not a D-react. You can do some weird kind of cool stuff. And again, if I saw one of these in someone's deck, I would not go, this is madness, why would you ever run it? I would go, oh, I like the cool tech. I like that you've got a way to be able to go, right, I block with a 3 block or a 4 block into dominate, and then I make it into a 5 or 6 block, and I can full stop something. And you can't stop me by being command and conquer, or by using, is it Dreadball? Or, any of the things that sort of force this to go no. And at the same time, it's blue and it's earth. And, I think it's an interesting card. I don't think it's good enough, but as I say, like, honestly, if I saw one in a deck, I'd just be like, yeah, cool tech. I like it. And I think it goes here. Very hard to know which of these two we do, but we'll go there, I think. It's it's interesting. Boom is a card I played a lot of. I tested that out for a long time to see if you can get somewhere because effectively you can cycle it for free as long as you've got the setup. There is some potential there, but it gets stuck so much. I just eventually went cold on it and was like, yeah, I would rather run some of the other tech, and I'd rather run yellows. You get pushed into that place where you're like, I think I'd take a yellow. Um, I think actually in the end, Summer's Fall was what pushed it out of my deck entirely. You basically can't make profit off it. That's its big problem. We don't get a benefit from playing Earth actions. If our hero ability was like, if you play an Earth action, get something, we'd be looking at it more. What it does is like get rid of your hand and give you another random hand. And the randomness is a problem because the amount of times you draw something and go, well, this isn't playable, skip turn, is far too high. And that basically means it lands, I would say, about here. And that brings us to our last one, Weave Earth. It's just completely middling. We can't fuse, so that's irrelevant. So it's your next Earth or Elemental attack gets +1. Who cares, right? That's the honest statement on it, just who cares. It's not as bad as D tier, it's somewhere in the middle of C tier. And that gives us the entirety of the list filled out. I don't think anything is groundbreaking in the S and A tier. I really kind of wanted to do this because I wanted to discuss the things that I put up high in B tier, because I do think we slightly overlook them sometimes. They don't make the cut for a reason, but I think some of them are so very, very close. And there are a lot of times where I stare at my deck list and go, I do feel like I'd like another Earth Blue, and I do look at these cards and go, maybe these could make it. But yeah, hopefully this is filmed well, because I'll be very sad if it hasn't. Hopefully this has given you something to think about. If nothing else, hopefully this has given you, I have no idea how long I've been recording, but I'm going to go with 25 minutes of entertainment. I feel like I've gone on for a long time. And I'm going to leave you with the Hunger Games cake decorating face boy in Fertile Ground. Thank you for watching all the way through this. I will see you in the next one.